Okay, hello again, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, the SIL Multi-Crop Thresher, Scaling and Success in the Field. My name is Amy Karyanakis. I'm the Communications Manager for the Soybean Innovation Lab, and I get to be your moderator today. Today's webinar is sponsored by the Soybean Innovation Lab, a U.S. Feed the Future initiative focused on improving soybean production and utilization in sub-Saharan Africa. Today, we are joined by registrants from over 28 different countries, representing organizations within the private sector, academia, development agencies, and research institutions. So welcome, everyone. Before we begin, I would like to give everyone a quick overview of the GoToWebinar software. This you can use to engage with panelists, ask questions, and access our webinar resources. Whether you're using the desktop or web application today, you'll see a questions pane on your control panel. Please type in your questions as they arise. We will collect all of your questions and address as many as possible during the question and answer session at the end of the webinar. Questions that are not answered during the webinar will receive a written response after the webinar has concluded. On your GoToWebinar control panel, you'll also see a handouts pane. Expand this pane to access today's presentations, materials, and the webinar agenda. Right now, I'd like to give a quick introduction of today's panelists before beginning the webinar. First, we have Mr. Jeffrey Apiage. He's an agricultural engineer and the designer of SIL's multi-crop thresher. At only 22 years old, Jeffrey is changing the face of agricultural mechanization, education, and training across Africa. He is the founder and CEO of SAITech. He works with the Soybean Innovation Lab to create and provide training programs for young engineers, equipment fabricators, and vocational schools to enable the local manufacture of the SIL multi-crop thresher. Thank you for joining us today, Jeffrey. We also have the privilege of Mr. Henry Kizito Musoki joining us today as a panelist. Henry is the CEO of Soya Solutions Eastern Africa Limited. He has over 20 years of experience working with local and international NGOs, managing human development programs in Uganda. Mr. Musoki has dedicated much of his time to working with small and medium holder farmers to increase their productivity and provide them with better access to markets. His passion for soybean as a nutritional crop for humans and animals led to the founding of his company, Soya Solutions. Welcome, Henry. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Carrie Clark. Dr. Clark is the director of CAFNR International Programs and an assistant research professor with the University of Missouri. She has an MS degree in agronomy and PhD in soil science. Carrie is SIL's principal investigator for grain and seed quality and leads all mechanization efforts. In this role, she teams up with in-country development organizations to design and implement customized training workshops and multi-crop thresher fabrication across sub-Saharan Africa. Thank you for joining us today, Carrie. So to get started with today's webinar, we'd like to launch our first interactive poll. We use these polls as a way to get your feedback and to get an understanding of the range of attendees here with us today. So for our first poll, we'd like to know who's joining us today. Please select all of the answers that apply, as more than one of these may describe you. We'll give everyone a few moments to record their answer. Okay, we'll be closing the poll in 3, 2, 1. All right, thanks everyone for your feedback. It looks like most of you responded that you work for a nonprofit. That's really helpful to get a little background on the attendees joining us in regards to the webinar topic, so thank you. All right, so next I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Jeffrey Apiage to share with us his session focused on the specifications and functionality of the thresher. Jeffrey, please begin whenever you're ready.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Jeffrey Apiage, CEO and co-founder of SAITech Company Limited. SAITech means Sustainable African Youth Enterprise and Technologies. Next slide, please. So at SAITech, we design and manufacture climate-smart agricultural machinery for African conditions and use. And working with the Soybean Innovation Lab, USAID Soybean Innovation Lab, we've been able to develop a number of agricultural machinery. There's a thresher, dryer, and hammer mill for poultry feed processing. And we have others in the line. Next slide. Yeah. So it all began with a passion for solution. So I was in school when the USAID Soybean Innovation Lab had a competition for thresher designs, and I just had a passion to design to just make an impact, and the goal was really to help women thresh crops. And now we did it, and now we have it. We have a multi-crop thresher, and that's how the SIL story began. Just a passion for solution, and then we make big impacts. Next story, please. Yeah, so this is a picture of with me and our director, Peter Goldsmith, presenting the award for the first thresher design for soybean. Next slide, please. Yeah. Next slide, please. Yeah. So after school, after these designs in school, I served in a rural community without electricity, and that was where I saw the challenge at firsthand. And I served as a primary school teacher for 1 year for my national service in Ghana. And so I realized that the problem was not only limited to women threshing by beating with sticks, but they also took away children that I taught in school to go and work on these farms. And most of the activity they did that was most drudgerous was also threshing, because threshing needed to be done timely because of the associated post-harvest loss with it if you don't thresh in time. So I got the inspiration from the field after these events to focus on the thresher and to make sure we scale this thresher across Africa. That was one of my main inspirations. Next slide, please. Yeah. So now doing trainings with the Soybean Innovation Lab, we've trained in over 7 African countries, and this is a training in Uganda, and in Uganda we trained women, and we've been training a number in other African countries. And critically, I've enjoyed working mostly with women because of how they take precision in fabrication to make sure we have the right products without cutting corners. So beyond this, after that, I've been training with the Soybean Innovation Lab in African countries. Next slide, please. Yeah. So in the very first training, we had this first design, and that was what was supposed to be scaled up earlier. But these were the challenges we found. This was intended to be used by one farmer. But then we realized that it was still very expensive for the smallholder farmer to purchase. But we had other people who wanted to buy this machine. But then it was also very small for them to use, because most of them work with over 100 smallholder farmers per season. And this thresher was not a size for them. So they called up for a bigger one that they can use for their work. And these are the service providers. So we went ahead to drop this model and came up with the next thresher. Next slide, please. So if you can see on your screen, we started with a MCT 1.0 that it had a few challenges. One of the critical things was that it was very fast, but then it threw grains out. So when we got this feedback, we went ahead to do the SIL 2.0, and we made it such that it wouldn't throw away seed, but then it reduced the capacity mostly for soybean that it does. And then in March 2019, when we were testing in Tanzania, we realized that for some of the Tanzanian grains, they had much bigger grains, and so it wasn't cleaning perfectly. So we added an extra suction to it, and so we keep developing along the chain to make it more multi-crop and to make it more functional to African countries. Next slide. Yeah. So our thresher can thresh maize, soybean, beans, rice, wheat, barley, common, pigeon pea, groundnuts, and other crops. So for groundnuts, for instance, you need to change the sieve completely to one made with rods, and you have to reduce the threshing speed to about 200 RPM. But then for it to be multi-crop, you need to change the sieves to the size of a grain. So bigger grains have bigger sieves, and then smaller grains have smaller sieves. And these are also with the multi-crop thresher. Next slide, please. Yeah. So just in August 2019, we built this thresher because when we did a modification on the previous threshers, we reduced the threshing capacity of soybean to about 300 kg per hour. But then we've added a new improvement in August to now increase it to about 500 kg per hour for soybean. And that is what we're currently working on, and we are scaling it up shortly. So this is the current design we're having that is coming to the market, and that's coming for the trainings. Next slide, please. So the thresher is about 2 meters tall, 1.65 meters long, and 1.1 meters wide. So with this, it's good enough for medium to large scale farmers, and can be pulled easily with a motor tricycle. Next slide, please. Yeah. So our thresher is powered by, right now it's powered by a diesel engine. We care about sustainability a lot, but this is the solution we have now. We're gradually moving from here. But it's also powered by just 2 gallons of fuel for a 10-hour run. And for maize, running on the minimum speed, the least speed possible, you should get about 1.5 tons of bag per hour. And for soybean, it's 300 kg per hour. For sorghum, rice, millet, is about 1 ton per hour. Next slide, please. Yeah. So looking at our functional parts, it comes with an engine, which is an 18 horsepower engine said earlier, and then the feeding of the crops is done through the hopper up there. And right now it comes with 2 sections. So we have the very first fan that after the crops are threshed, it cleans it well, and then the secondary section also does a extra cleaning to make sure we have very high quality grains that meet markets standards and are easily purchased by buyers. Next slide, please. Yeah. So we have on point 5 the tow. So our thresher is towed by a motor tricycle, can be towed by a motor tricycle and easily be put to wherever our farmers are. If you look at point 3, it's where the operator stands to feed into the thresher pretty easily. And with this, the youth that operate these machines are our targets. So we design it according to the average height of the youths across Africa. Next slide, please. So if you look here, you would see the suction adjuster. So one thing we have done is that when you are doing different kinds of crops, you would need to adjust the suction. So because with some amount of speed, you may lose seed. But with this adjuster, you can close it up to have up to 0% loss of grain through the suctions. Next slide, please. So as said earlier, we need different concaves for threshing. But another critical thing is the recommended moisture content for different grains. So these are the moisture contents you have that are recommended. And however, we have done test trials, especially with maize, that was over 32 in moisture content, and it did work 10%, and it did work perfectly. But these are still what we recommend. And also with the sieves, as I said earlier, the bigger the sieves, you use the bigger sieves with the bigger holes for the grain. So you could just look at the grain and say, hey, my grain, it looks big. This bigger sieve would do. So the sieves that comes with it, you just select for it. And maize, typically, we go with a 14mm sieve. Next slide, please. Soybean is 9. Yeah. So I spoke about our new addition to add on for more feed, and this is how it looks like. So very soon, when this is ready, farmers would be able to do about 500 kilograms of soybean per hour, and hopefully even reach up to 700 kilograms of soybean per hour, creating more food and bringing up more nutrition across Africa through soybean. Next slide, please. So at SIL, we have a production, and I'd love to show you our production now. Next slide, please. So this is how our machines look like when you purchase from us in SIL. And we focus on quality and standards. So we make sure that we use the right materials for durability and for the African context. Now, we also have an app that is designed for the service provider, because we know that it's the service providers that we reach to who form businesses with these threshers and reach out to hundreds and thousands of farmers per season. So we are coming up with this app for them. Next slide, please. Now with this app, farmers, the service providers will have very good control of the machine to be able to turn it on and off, to find its location and to find its usage data. The data will be the first time real yield data collection across Africa, and we'll be using it to track on grains so that we can know, putting in AI, the trends of agriculture in Africa in terms of productivity and in relation to mechanization. Now, this is also a very good tool to engage a lot of youth in the cities to be involved in agricultural mechanization and to promote agriculture across Africa, and helps the youth to work back with farmers. Next slide, please. Yeah, in the near future, just as we've done with the Soybean Innovation Lab to do trainings, we want to come up with a web app that will teach a number of youth, that specifically youth in technical schools, to be able to build agricultural machines of different kinds, just like the thresher, dryers, and others. And this we hope to do short. This we are doing and will launch shortly. Next slide, please. So by 2023, we envision to have manufactured 1,522 threshers, and we will have threshed over 1 million metric tons of grain, saving over 250,000 metric tons of grain that would otherwise have been lost. And in jobs, we estimate to provide over 14,000 jobs in both service provision and manufacturing for the youth across Africa. And we go back to the basis where I got the inspiration. We estimate to have saved over 300,000 critical school days for our children in Africa, knowing that they'll be in school to create a better Africa. Above everything, we will have liberated over 10,000 women and children for the most drudgeous activity of threshing. Next slide, please. Okay. So thank you. In this picture is a training we had in Rwanda with our director, Dr. Kerry Clark, and two fabricators, Imoro and Hakim, in Rwanda. Thank you. That's it.
All right. Thank you, Jeffrey. That was a great overview of the Thresher. Before we launch our next interactive poll, I just wanted to remind everyone to please type your questions into the questions pane of the GoToWebinar control panel. We will address as many questions as possible during the Q&A session at the end. Also, a reminder that the webinar is being recorded and that the recording will be sent to you after we conclude. Okay. So it's time to launch our second poll of the day. We'd like to know what is the biggest constraint or challenge for you regarding the multi-crop thresher? Is it the cost of the thresher, the availability of the thresher, the capacity of the thresher, or a general lack of understanding of how it works? We'll give everyone a few moments to record their answer. Okay, and we'll go ahead and be closing the polls in 3, 2, 1. All right, and it looks like most of you responded, 50% that it was the cost of the thresher, 32% was the availability of the thresher, and 12% was the capacity of the thresher. All right. Okay, so I'd like to now turn it over to Mr. Henry Kizito Musoki. Mr. Musoki hosted a SIL training in 2018 to boost local fabrication of threshers and also to provide support for his soy processing facility and contracted growers. Mr. Musoki, you can begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much, Amy. Greetings to everyone who has joined us today. My name is Kizito Musoki Henry. I am the chairman and CEO of Soya Solutions Eastern Africa Limited, which is a private business incorporated in Uganda, and we are investing in the soybean value chain. Our focus is processing soybeans, but then processing quality soybeans involving the support of smallholder farmers and entrepreneurs along the value chain of soybean. We recognize as a company that you cannot succeed in our environment of smallholder farmers when you don't involve an investment in the value chain, right from seed up to the distribution of your products. And that informed our investment in making sure that farmers handle the post-harvest issues of soybean in a mechanized way. It took us a bit of time to be able to identify a practical situation where we shall have the thresher. And that is how Soybean Innovation Lab came into our picture, and we have established this relationship. So the farmers that we work with are tilling 1 to 5 acres, and they are scattered all over the country. And they grow soybean to earn an income for their households. And we think that as a company, we should be able to work with these people, support them to be able to supply us with quality soybeans that will be able to sustain our business. We make money and they make money. That's the principle upon which our business is premised. Next slide, please. So what have we done? Since we started our business, we've participated in research, and this participation in research and dissemination of research results is actually informing the partnership that we have with the Soybean Innovation Lab and with SciTech to get the Thresher technology from the lab, from the research, from the people who have invented it onto the Ugandan farmer. And I'm sure from the Ugandan farmer, we should be able to go beyond the farmers in Uganda and possibly go into the region where Soybean Innovation Lab has actually worked. So we have mobilized up to 8,000 smallholder farmers in the whole country of Uganda, and we are counting. We have sourced world-class equipment for processing our soybeans, extrusion equipment from Iowa, and we are setting up our plant right now in northern Uganda. This plant will definitely require a minimum of 6,000 metric tons of soybeans annually to start with. And we will be able to make sure that for us to get these soybeans, which are quality soybeans with the right moisture content, with the right foreign material, we definitely had to make sure that the thresher is introduced in Uganda. So we worked with the Soybean Innovation Lab, with the SciTech, to introduce this thresher through the training of 16 Ugandan fabricators last December. And then we have also initiated long-term partnerships with the Ugandan businesses, with the civil society, to scale up fabrication of the thresher among farmers in Uganda, because this is one of the biggest post-harvest issues we consider requires everybody's attention if we are to improve lives, create sustainable incomes, and also have growing SMEs like ours. Next slide. So our collaboration, as I've talked about, is started way back in May 2018. I happened to be a participant in a regional innovation partners meeting in Kampala, and I sat on the same desk, the same table with the Dr. Peter Goldsmith and Courtney Tamimi, and we talked about threshing. And that is how the information came through that actually investment has already been made to research to support the SciTech innovation of the thresher. And what we agreed upon was Soya Solutions as a company to be the host institution to organize the initial training of Ugandan fabricators. And thus we agreed on this workshop in December, and we actually made sure it happens. Next slide. Of course, as you note, we had common denominators between Soya Solutions Eastern Africa and Soya Innovation Lab. We, as two institutions, had a common denominator. We all want to see that the soybean value chain is sustainable. It is growing in the developing world. People are accessing cheap, accessible plant and animal protein. You know, that is the driving force. And when that kind of common denomination is available, then having a sustainable and working relationship becomes very easy. And that's exactly what happened. It became very, very easy for us to realize that we need to invest the little that we had, or the much that we had. We needed to enlist the support of other players who think like us. We enlisted Plan International Uganda. They put us some financial support onto this training. Uganda Small Scale Industries Association came on board to support us. Nakawa Vocational Training Institute came on board to support us to make sure that the training of these Ugandan fabricators actually takes place. And you'll notice that we got the trainees from all over the country. The reason is we wanted to spread the skill. We wanted to make sure that out of the 16, possibly we can have a yield of 70% of really, really good fabricators who will carry the business forward into the future, working with the SciTech and others to continually improve this thresher so that we mechanize threshing and post-harvest. Next slide. So during the 6 days, as you can see, that is in Nakawa Vocational Training Institute, we actually produced 3 threshers, prototypes. We call them prototypes. And by January, February, they were ready for testing, and for the second harvest of in our country. Our country has 2 growing seasons. So we have the major season being July to August, and then a slightly smaller season is this January, February. So that's when this thresher was ready for testing. Next slide. We participated in the New Vision Graduate Expo in Kampala, which was in February 2019, and the whole purpose of our participation in this expo was to, to showcase this prototype that actually it exists. Of course, the expo was visited by thousands of people, and our stand received hundreds of visitors inquiring about the Thresher and what it can do and how people can be able to access it. We sat down as a group and we agreed to have an association of fabricators. This institutional setup would be able to help the trainees to follow up on each other, to support peer learning, to exchange experiences, and make sure that if one gets a contract which is beyond their capacity, they should be able to enlist the support of other fabricators. So this association is being incubated within SIL Solutions, and we have made contacts with the Uganda Industrial Research Institute in Kampala to incubate the business, so that it becomes a fully fledged post-harvest business, which makes threshers, and maybe later other technology can be introduced to be able to support smallholder agriculture and improve quality. Next slide. So when we deployed the thresher, one of the threshers, to a farm in Mbarara, we received the feedback, and as you can see, it was actually being used right now at that farm, and it is that feedback that has fed into the modifications SciTech and the Soybean Innovation Lab have made onto the one that we made, and we should be able to have these changes instituted on the prototypes and the orders that have been received of the threshers. Next slide. So what is the way forward? We think that from the experience that we've had in the last 9 months or so, we think that this is the way we should have this thresher to be. This is the way we should move forward. One, we must maintain the thresher as a business to service providers. We must make sure that if it is a business, then they'll be able to pay back in case they borrow money to buy a thresher. We must maintain the quality of materials that have been recommended by the inventors and the Soybean Innovation Lab, and that means that the cost will be a constant, given the fact that the materials are fairly pricey in our part of the world. But for us to be able to maintain quality, then service providers must look at this as a viable business for them to take risks. We must create demand through aggressive marketing and analyzing situations in the various parts of the country, and then provide business planning support to the trained fabricators. And we are doing that through the association. We are establishing linkages with the financial institutions in Uganda, microfinance, banks, so that they can be able to look at these threshers as businesses, so that they can support thousands of young people or business people scattered in the country to acquire these machines and be able to provide a service to farmers at a fee, with a multiplier effect on quality and eventually competitiveness of our grain, not only at our factory, but also within the region. Next slide, please. So we are following up with the Ministry of Agriculture, Animal Industry and Fisheries, as well as local government production departments in Uganda, and we expect this to be bulk buyers. But the information and the communication to all these people that we are following up with is very, very clear. This is a business. So if you are supporting district production departments, they should be able to identify service providers who are willing to do this as a business. We want to discourage simply buying threshers so that they are kept in the backyard. they must be able to run around during harvest seasons and do the work that they are meant to do. So that is the message to the ministry, and we are talking to our ministry to make sure that if there are any budgetary support to the districts or to purchase these threshers, then whoever is going to access them is going to do that as a business, and there must be minimum qualifications. We also recommend, and we think that there should be a consolidated package to the service providers. It should include basic spare parts, fast-moving spare parts, of course, the thresher itself. We should have the minimum number of sieves for at least 5 crops: maize, soybean, common beans, groundnuts, sorghum. Some of the crops that really are grown in Uganda should at least 5 sieves should be a service provider should be able to have 5 sieves. And then there should be a business skills training to all these people who are buying this thresher, who are accessing the thresher, so that they run viable businesses instead of one can start with one and end up with 100 of them. Just like you see, we have those small taxis that carry that provide transportation. Some people have got 10, some people have got 1, some people have got 50. The reason is when somebody sees that the business actually works, they start with 1 and they might end up with 100. And you can look at the multiplier effect that it's going to have on the production system in Uganda on processors like us who are looking for quality grain to put in our machines. Next slide, please. We're also recommending establishing actually a leasing product to facilitate access by service providers with affordable amortized payments. So we are encouraging finance institutions to look at this thresher and the people not to look at somebody looking for 12 million Uganda shillings in one go or $3,000 in one go, but to have a product that is leasing all this, the thresher, and then somebody puts across a minimum amount, and then the rest is paid over a period that is agreed, possibly 3, 4, 5, 6 seasons, growing seasons. And then we're also designing a service provider business plan template. Many of the people that we expect to have the thresher in the countryside, and they need to have some business planning literacy. And this simple template should be able to help them to access finance and also to monitor the way the machine is operating. And as you have heard from SciTech, eventually they will become more and more, high tech. And then as the business grows, we can even have all the apps that are being innovated to help the service provision of threshing to grow. We're also creating awareness amongst produce buyers and dealers on adherence to strict grain buying standards. The growth of the thresher is going to start from the ground. When the farmers realize that you cannot sell a certain quality of grain, then they are going to see how can we have the best quality grain. That then threshing comes in, drying comes in, and when the buyers start insisting that we cannot buy your grain unless it is of this standard, we are going to have a multiplier effect on the thresher, and then it's going to become part and parcel of the agrarian system, and all of us along the entire thresher chain, from the inventor to the research, to Soybean Innovation Lab, to businesses like Soya Solutions and others, we shall have one, and of course we shall be able to feed our people in the future. And we want to maintain a demand-driven scale-up and after-sale service strategy, so that whoever is into it is looking at this as something that is beneficial in terms of business and income generation. And we think with that, we should be able to feed our growing populations. We make money as everybody makes money. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Henry. We appreciate you taking the time to share your experiences with us today. We're getting a lot of great questions in, so thank you. Next, it's time to launch our next poll. For this poll, we'd like to test your knowledge a bit, see if you've been paying attention. What crops can the multi-crop thresher handle? We'll give everyone a few moments to record their answer. All right, and we'll be waiting a few more moments. Just make sure everybody gets a chance to answer. And then we'll be closing the poll in 3, 2, 1. All right, and it looks like the majority of you chose all of the above, which is correct. SIL's multi-crop thresher can handle sorghum, cowpea, maize, soybean, rice, wheat, barley, beans, and millet. So great job. We'll have one more poll before we get into the Q&A session of the webinar. We're getting a lot of great questions coming in, so please keep them coming. We'll address as many as possible during the Q&A session of the webinar at the end. Any we don't get today, we'll be sure to provide a written response to the attendee. Again, you can type in your questions in the question pane. Right now, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to our final panelist, Dr. Carrie Clark. Dr. Clark will be giving us an overview of the training workshops and what goes into hosting them. Carrie, you can begin whenever you're ready.
All right, thank you, Amy. Go ahead and next slide. So I do want to mention that Soybean Innovation Lab and SIL have been working together since 2016 to provide the best thresher that we can find for Africa. We've also been doing training since 2016. So you can now purchase Soybean Innovation Lab threshers from trained fabricators in Ghana, Uganda, Ethiopia, Tanzania, Malawi, Rwanda, and Burundi. The prices will vary a lot from country to country, largely based on the cost of raw materials in each country. So some of you are probably curious about the cost of the machine. So 2 years ago, we were able to build it for $2,000 in Ghana. Inflation has increased that quite a bit, so that now the price is $3,200 a machine in Ghana, up to $4,600, depending on. And the $4,600 one is extremely high quality, competitive with anything manufactured in a developed nation like the United States. We have found that in some countries, especially the landlocked ones, particularly Burundi, that materials were extremely hard to find. Where you do have better sourcing of raw materials in a country like Uganda or Tanzania, the price is a little bit better. Compared to imports, the price of the Soybean Innovation Lab thresher, if it averages around $3,500, a comparable imported thresher will average around $8,000 US. Next slide. So the Soybean Innovation Lab does provide training, and some of those countries where we've trained already, like such as Tanzania, are quite large. So we are willing to go back to a country in another region and do more training, or to go to new countries for training. So we do provide the training on a sliding scale based on your organization's capacity to pay. So it costs us about $10,000 for our part of the training, which is paying the trainers and our transport and lodging. So we do a sliding scale where you may pay nothing if you don't have the capacity to pay, up to $10,000 US if you do have capacity to pay. We have 3 trainers. All 3 are also fabricators in Ghana. You all already met Jeffrey. We also have Moro and Hakeem. Moro and Hakeem have hundreds of these threshers on the ground in Ghana and have been building them for 15 years each. The training is very intensive. As Henry mentioned, it takes 6 days. We work from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. daily, and we work hard during that time. It's a hands-on fabrication in the workshop, and then that is mixed in with classroom instruction, including discussion on business development, customer education, and quality control. And we really stress customer education, because if a fabricator sells a thresher and the customer doesn't know how to use it, it's a failure right out the door. So having people that know how to use them, whether they be farmers, farmer cooperatives, or service providers, is vital to the success of the program. Next slide. So we team with a host organization. Henry already told you about his experiences as a host organization. So there's several things that the host organization must do. The first thing is that they recruit the participants. We can have anywhere from 10 to 20 participants, and we've had even, I think, maybe up to 30, which is a little more difficult, but 20 is probably the ideal number. So when they recruit those participants, we recommend that they look for fabricators in their area that already have some experience making ag equipment and that have some contacts with farmers. A lot of welders in parts of Africa may only be making things like doors and windows, which is the big product for most welders. And it's a little hard to take the leap from that. It's possible, but it's a lot easier for them to be successful later if they are familiar with agricultural equipment and they know farmers that can become customers. Next slide. Additionally, the hosting organization must find and finance the training workshop. That can be a vocational school. Henry mentioned the one we used in Uganda. In Tanzania, we were at Camertech, which is a government research institute. That training workshop must have appropriate tools. We will work, if you are interested in hosting a fabrication training, we'll work with you on what tools are absolutely required. And they don't all have to be in the same place either, but in general, the workshop must have welders, benders, rollers, drills, and a lathe must be available somewhere near. The host organization also provides logistical support to the trainees. At a very minimum, the host organization must provide lunch and break food during the training days, because if we have to leave to go find food, we will not be able to finish. They also, if they are a little bit maybe well endowed financially, they could also help trainees with things like lodging, putting them up in dorms, transport, that kind of thing, because these guys are usually taking off a week of work, so they're losing money, and they're also, having to put out money for coming there and their food and lodging, which can be difficult financially. Some of them are very, very dedicated, but for most of them, they're not familiar with the product, so it's hard for them to make that leap. And so if you can give them a little help, it's good. It helps us get quality people. But if not, we find that we still can find people that are willing to commit to this kind of education and training. Next slide. The most important thing the host institution does, though, is that they have to be willing to provide post-training follow-up to build the thresher industry. And I think Henry went over that very nicely on what they're trying to do in Uganda. And so it's not enough just to come teach people how to build something and then leave. There has to be somebody there on the ground willing to put the effort into connecting and making it actually work. Next slide. So that kind of post-training follow-up to build a thresher industry can include things which, again, Henry went over quite nicely, but connecting those service providers and farmers to the fabricators. Sometimes the fabricators are in the city, the service providers and the farmers are out in the country, and you have to make those connections. One way to do that is to invite fabricators to demonstrate at fairs, events. Maybe the host organization would help them transport a thresher to a field day out in the rural area or something similar. And then again, Henry also talked about financing and how important it is to connect both the fabricators and the end users to financing. And then for me, again, training is incredibly important. You can't send a thresher out the door for somebody to use if they don't know how to use it. So you have to have good training in operation, maintenance, repair, and even maybe a little bit of business development. So some of the host organizations will not only work with the fabricators, but they will go on to work with the people who become service providers to make sure that those are successful businesses. Next slide. I think Henry also mentioned that you need to do post-training post-fabrication training follow-up by testing your threshers. So we can build from 1 to 3 threshers during the fabrication training. Those then need to be taken out, tested for your crops and your conditions. So for instance, we were in Tanzania and we found out SIAT was doing common beans. That was new for us because in West Africa, you don't see many common beans. And what we found was that we had to make some modifications for it to work better with common beans because beans break easily in a thresher. So we added the secondary suction fan for chaff cleaning so that we could slow down the threshing drum so that the beans wouldn't break. And so now we respond to all of your feedback and we provide crop-specific modifications. And we do believe that we're at the point now where we can, it pretty much, it does very, very well in every crop that we previously mentioned. Next slide.
All right. Thank you, Carrie. That was really informative. We're going to go ahead and launch our final poll before the Q&A session begins. Now that you're all experts when it comes to the SIL Thresher, we have one final question for you. How can mechanized threshing improve productivity? We'll give everyone a few moments to record their answer. Okay, we'll be closing the poll in 3, 2, 1. All right, excellent. Looks like most of you chose all of the above. That is correct. So we're going to go ahead and dive into all the great questions that you've submitted. Courtney Tamimi will be the moderator for our Q&A session today. Courtney is the Associate Director of the Soybean Innovation Lab and has been compiling all of your questions throughout the webinar. I'm going to go ahead and let her get started so that we can try and get to all of your questions before we conclude for the day. Courtney?
Thank you, Amy. Yeah, we've gotten a lot of great questions in. I'm going to first start on just a couple quick hitting questions related to the functionality. So Kathy Fury, who's with Heifer International in the US, wanted to know, and maybe this is better for Jeffrey and Carrie to answer, but how many units have been sold in Ghana? And is there a distribution model to sell this product, especially in northern Ghana where most of soybean is grown?
So I'll start out. So the person who's been doing the most of these would be Moro in the Upper West region of Ghana, and he has over 100 units out in the field that are either this exact unit or very similar. And Jeffrey's company, he can speak if he wants, but they've just started production, and I think within the first month they'd sold 4. Last year, Hakeem and Moro got probably about 40 out.
Great, that's helpful. And another question probably for Jeffrey and Carrie are, how many, Austin Leafers asked this, he's with the American Soybean Association and the World Initiative for Soy and Human Health. Austin asked, how many people are needed to operate the thresher at full capacity, including both loading and bagging the grain?
Jeffrey, take that one.
Okay, so ideally 2 people is enough, but we've just realized that it averagely takes 3 people. 3 people, just so 2 people do loading so that it's faster, and 1 person bags.
But the bags do weigh. In most countries, the bags are 100-kilogram bags. So normally, whoever the farmer that owns the field, so the service provider would have probably 3 people on their salary, and then the farmers whose crop it is would also be assisting. So they're going to be hauling the bag, from the thresher over to their storage unit. So there's usually several people involved that are above and beyond the service providers.
Great. Thank you very much. Another question probably for Jeffrey. Henry Davies with the Eden Social Development Foundation in South Africa wanted to know when the drawings for the extra suction fan will be made available. This might be something you've heard
I want to know that
too. Jeffrey, do you want to take that?
Soon is the answer, but very soon, very soon.
We have a training coming up very soon. So Henry Davies, it should be out in October.
Great. This question might be best for Henry to answer. So Pavel Kuzmenko with Potfield East Africa Limited in Uganda asked, wanted to know about a threshing cost analysis. So essentially, if a rural enterprise invests in a thresher and offers threshing as a service to farmers at a fee, which is similar to the way maize and rice hullers do in eastern Uganda, how high can this fee be per kilogram of grain to cover both the fixed and operating costs? So essentially, what's the maximum that a service provider could charge for threshing grain to cover both the costs of the capital for the thresher and the operating costs for getting the thresher to that field?
Okay. We have actually come up with a cost of 100 Uganda shillings per kilo of soybeans and threshed. So a 100 kilogram bag of soybeans would actually cost up to 10,000 Uganda shillings. Our thinking is if the thresher has been bought with amortized payments and somebody is able to do 300 kilos per hour and they have got an 8-hour threshing activity, then you start working, you ask the service provider to start working backwards and determine how best they can be able to get this money paid back, because we don't expect anyone to come up with the 3,500 US dollars in cash to buy the thresher. That's the way we think. That's how we have designed the cost. So 100 shillings per kilo. I mean,
Great.
per kilo of soybeans.
Great. Thank you.
Courtney,
Another question.
Can I add that?
Please.
Can I add a comment for people who aren't in Uganda and don't know Uganda shillings? In a lot of places, the service provider charges 10% of the crop harvested. So, for instance, the capacity in maize for this thresher is around 30 100 kilo bags. So you would get 3 100 kilo bags an hour as the service provider.
Great. Thank you. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, so we did some maths here in Ghana, and the grain value for threshing in a season of about 100 days of work, working just 4 hours in a day, it's about and taking out maybe Saturdays and Sundays is about $16,000 of revenue in dollars, and basically your operational cost will be about 9,000. The thresher and operational cost would be over $9,000, but your operational cost will come from the revenue you make on the thresher. So you just buy the thresher, and as it keeps going, it makes the money to take care of itself, and at the end you could have the profit. So that's the data we gathered in Ghana for each thresher.
Great. Thank you very much. Another question, and again, this might go to Henry or to Carrie and Jeffrey. So Mercy Kamau with the organization IFDC in Kenya asked, how are we addressing sustainable business models around smallholder farmers who cannot afford individual purchase? And I know this is something that Henry's passionate about in terms of the thresher not really being suitable for an individual smallholder, but more for a service provider. So Henry or Jeffrey, can you briefly touch on that?
Yeah, let me start. Maybe Jeffrey will come in later. You know, when we went for the exhibition, the Harvest Money exhibition in February, that was one of the main questions that was coming from the visitors to our stand. And we were very, very clear on this, that it would be quite difficult for a smallholder farmer to invest in this thresher the way it is. That's why we have talked about service provider, because we expect that these smallholder farmers, one of them can decide to make this as a business, and that's why we are recommending access through leasing, amortization of payments, so that eventually they start growing that business from a humble beginning, and eventually it becomes serious business as far as they are concerned. But if the people who are coming say, why don't you make a small one so that we can be able to afford it? We said, okay, if you are going to have this thresher and you are putting it in your backyard, and your neighbor is using sticks to thresh their soybeans, then the purpose of our innovation will be defeated. You go into acquire this as a business so that you can do the same thing for other people, and you make money as they also churn out good quality grain.
Great. All right, I just want to keep moving. Jeff, did you have anything briefly to add?
Yeah, so So critically, as Mr. Henry said, so on the side of SATEC, we realized that we have to increase accessibility of our treasures to the market, and we just had a constraint. Okay, so we wanted to now just make the treasures and then just make them available to all smallholder farmers who want to use it, and then they just pay for the service of it for that service. But then it's a capital cost. That means we have to manufacture a number of treasures and then get the smart systems working on it and give it to these farmers so that we increase accessibility through other organizations to that already work with farmers. But
Great.
so that's the way we're looking into that.
Great. Thank you both. Another question came in from Andrew Baguma, who is with the Mwino Group in Uganda. So he asked a question, how do we measure the moisture content, given that it is expensive for smallholder farmers, yet it is a requirement before threshing? Any thoughts on that?
So in Ghana, we actually in the same office with a company called SASI Technologies who make moisture meters. So we sell alongside and with our treasures. We make another SASI technology moisture meters, and then they can have to use it. But the beautiful thing is that our treasures also do beyond the recommended moisture content of these machinery. So farmers usually have no idea, but they put it in and it works perfectly for them.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Another.
May I?
Yeah, go ahead, Henry.
I think as we build the package that the service provider should have, one of them should actually be a moisture meter, so that eventually it becomes part and parcel of whatever they have. When they go to thresh, and then they measure the moisture content. We have a company called Brazafric in Uganda. It has very good moisture meters, and then we have smaller ones. So we have to make sure that the package of this business person, is complete with all the required technology.
Great, thank you very much. Another question came in from Dick Tinsley, who's with Colorado State University in the US. So he asked, he wanted to know from your perspective, what is the recommended charge structure? Is payment done in cash or in grain? He noted that payment in grain can encourage both the fabricator and the farmer to have a vested interest in the grain quality emerging from the thresher, since payment would be done in grain. But he wanted to get your thoughts and perspectives on the recommended charge structure, payment in cash or in grain.
Yeah, I think Jeffrey has an answer because Jeffrey's actually become a service provider. But the other what we found, like in Ghana, where we have quite a few of these machines, is that the preferred method is to pay in grain, and for many reasons. One is that like Dr. Tinsley said, it gives everybody a vested interest in the quality of the grain. It also allows people without without cash to participate. And then also what our service providers have found is that if they take grain, hold it, and wait for market fluctuations to improve, that they actually make more money if they take grain than cash.
Exactly as Kerry said. So as I said, we are also exploring the service provision model so that we make our treasures directly for service provision. And it's good. The reason why it's also good to take grains with our treasures is that right from start, the grain quality has been improved. And as Kerry said, we are able to, when the season is low, the prices go up. So actually, with the same math we've done for the grain value of about $16,000, you could actually get double that value when you take grain, and it helps the farmers too, because they only pay in grain and just a very small fraction of their yield.
Great. Great, thank you. I just want to know, I know we are past the hour, but we have quite a few more questions. If you need to jump off, go ahead. We are recording this session, but if you can hang on and want to hear the panelists' responses to the questions, we'll continue for about another 5 minutes. So another question came in from, this is just pretty much to Carrie, Leroy Peterson with Business Development Consulting in the U.S. wanted to know if any SIL staff would be at the World Food Prize talking about the Thresher. So I wanted to just note that you would be there and hopefully Jeffrey.
Yeah, we have we will have a booth at the World Food Prize, but we're not giving a talk. But please do stop by our booth.
Great. And another question came in from Mark Fisher. He wanted to know, would there be a benefit to supply some critical parts from a U.S. manufacturer at a lower cost, or perhaps a kit of the parts from a U.S. manufacturer? Has that been something you've considered, or would that be of interest or cost effective at all?
Jeffrey, you want to take that one?
Yeah, so yes, as part of my job, I've been trying to look at parts that can be sourced elsewhere at a lower cost, and then also meet the demand that we have. And so that is something I'm looking into currently, and hopefully, if everything is all right, settled, I could be in the US to check some of these.
And there is a couple parts that we do have issues with in Africa. One would be the pulleys, finding the right size pulleys, and two is the concave sieves. So yes, we are thinking about that issue.
Great. And I guess related to additional parts, Eric Lane asked, is there any kind of training or supply chain support that is available to sustain the Thresher engine specifically? Or is that an issue or a challenge you've encountered? But he specifically wanted to know about training and supply chain support to sustain the Thresher engine.
So the engine is actually an engine that is commonly found throughout Africa. It is a Chinese engine. We have found it in every single market we've been in, and there's also already a repair and supply chain on those engines. They're used for irrigation pumps. They're used for two-wheel tractors. They're used in many applications.
Great, great. And we had a few questions coming in from individuals looking for connections with specific fabricators in countries. So I just wanted to let you know that we'll connect with you offline and connect you directly with that fabrication organization or company in the country you're interested in. But we did have a question from Samuel Giconyo with the Syngenta Foundation for Sustainable Agriculture in Kenya. And he wanted to know if there were any trained fabricators in Kenya yet, or if we had plans to expand the fabrication training to Kenya.
That's for Jeffrey.
Okay, so SIL is setting up in Kenya soon. So very soon, we already have a facility, and we will start up fabrication in Kenya.
And also there probably will be some local fabrication involved with that too.
Yeah.
We do need a host.
And we're working with a host of local fabricators to work with the system, so we ensure quality, and then we deliver these products. So we've already spoken with a number of local fabricators in Kenya with our survey, and got the pricing, the material costs, and so we just yet to execute.
Great, great, thank you. I think we'll just have one or two more questions, then we'll wrap up. Let's see. Again, another question that came in that I thought would be good for you to address is, what did you determine was economically the optimal size of the Thresher, looking at it both from the farmer and the service provider's perspective? I know you went through different iterations where you originally started with a small Thresher and have now moved up to a larger one. So can you just speak on the final iteration and why that size works for both the farmer and the service provider?
I'll hit on that one first. So we tested a number of existing Threshers that were available in the African market, and we have had a lot of people say, "Can you build a smaller Thresher?" Well, Jeffrey as an engineer can address that a little bit more with you, but what we found when we tested the small Thresher is that that we had too high of seed loss due to design issues when you go smaller, and also there's a huge problem with when you have a smaller Thresher with smaller capacity. People start to jam material in. because they want it to go faster. So, so what we found, you know, like looking at the sociology of use of a thresher is that this is, as Jeffrey said, we went through several different iterations of size of thresher and capacity, and that this is the one where you basically, you can feed it constantly without there being problems. It has a large enough capacity to meet farmers' needs, and it has the right capacity to be profitable for service providers. Jeffrey, you got anything to add?
Yeah. So I think everything has been said on, but the only thing is we could have smaller threshers that we could work on improving design to make sure it works well. However, when you look at the other constraints of already our smallholder farmers and everything else Kerry has already said, it's not a recommended way, even though we could have it.
Great, thank you very much. I think we've got a few more questions, but probably best to wrap it up since we're about a little bit past the hour. If we didn't get to your question, we will definitely write you following the webinar and connect you with the panelists. We appreciate all your feedback, really great questions coming in, and a lot of great interest to get connected with existing fabricators in the 7 countries that we've already expanded to. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Amy, and thanks everyone so much.
Yeah, thanks, Courtney. Big thank you to Jeffrey, Kerry, and Henry for taking the time to be with us today. I'd also like to thank all of our great attendees today for your interaction, your feedback. This concludes the SIL Multi-Crop Thresher Scaling and Success in the Field webinar. Thank you so much for your participation. Just a reminder that today's webinar has been recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent to you in a follow-up email. Also, when you exit the webinar today, you'll be asked to complete a short survey. We really appreciate all of your feedback and the time you've spent with us, so please take just a few moments to complete this. We rely heavily on your feedback to learn more about how we can improve our webinars and also find out what content you're interested in for future events. So again, thank you so much for joining us, and have a great rest of your day or evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.